Hey guys, Bam Guitar Dude here. So today I want to talk to you a little bit about coffee roasting and some of the things that I've learned and discovered over the past year or so of doing this on a budget. And what I have done, my approach to roasting coffee is to basically do it yourself. So there are a lot of machines that are available out there, but a lot of them are very expensive, and I did not want to spend a whole lot of money initially experimenting around with coffee roasting. So I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the things that I've discovered, breakthroughs, if you will, and maybe these tips and suggestions will help you along. So one of the first things to learn about roasting coffee is just the coffee bean itself. So when you buy unroasted coffee, it looks like this right here. It's just a green, kind of slightly tannish looking bean, and it's hard as a rock. And roasting coffee is not baking coffee, okay? There is a process to roasting coffee. And often you'll hear people talk about profiles, coffee roasting profiles, and, what does that mean? Well, what I have discovered and what I've learned over the past year or so is a very generic profile for roasting coffee and getting decent results is the 4-4-4 roasting profile, okay? So what I mean is 4 minutes of drying time, 4 minutes of browning time, and 4 minutes of development time, okay? And one of the breakthroughs that I had in roasting coffee is using a thermometer to measure the temperature of the beans while I am roasting the coffee, okay? So the way this temperature thing works is you use what's called a thermocouple, which is this wire here, okay? It plugs into your thermometer, and the tip of the wire, I don't know if you're going to be able to see that or not, but the tip of the wire is touching the coffee bean itself while you're roasting the coffee. And so your temperature gauge is giving you a reading, okay, of the temperature of the outside of the coffee bean, all right? And generically, what I've learned with my gear is, whenever I roast in Celsius, okay, because Celsius is a slower measurement than Fahrenheit. Fahrenheit moves really quick, and it's hard for me to kind of keep track of what the roast is doing, so I roast in Celsius. So normally, whenever my coffee beans get to about 150 degrees Celsius, I know that my drying phase is over. And so I try to shoot for 4 minutes to get to 150 degrees Celsius. My next waypoint, if you will, is 190 degrees Celsius. And I try to let the roast take about 4 minutes to get from 150 to 190, and then I know that my browning phase has lasted, the generic 4 minute time. And then beyond that, you're developing the coffee, you're darkening the coffee, if you will. And first crack normally happens in that third phase for me. And I normally end my roast when my temperature gauge reads anywhere from 215 to 230. And I determine that on what taste I want to get out of my coffee, okay? And the way I normally roast coffee is I do a medium roast, but it's on the darker side of medium, so a full city or full city plus. And you can Google, what the coffee beans look like when they're at full city or full city plus. But this is a roast of Ethiopia that I did last weekend. That's Full City Plus. And this is probably one of the best roasts that I've done to date. And I actually did it in my bread machine. So, yeah, I think measuring the temperature of the coffee bean is the easiest way for a beginner to kind of get a handle on roasting coffee, because you don't really know when you're starting out what to smell for or what to look for. So using temperature, I think, is the easiest way. Now let's talk about some of the equipment that I've used. So a lot of people use a popcorn popper, and I've used a popcorn popper. The challenge with the popcorn poppers, these things get really hot really fast, and you have a very small batch size that you can roast in these things. You know, basically 4 grams of coffee or whatever, 4 ounces of coffee at most, okay? But even with this popper, I built a way to run that thermocouple down into the chamber, the inside of this popper, so that I can measure the temperature. And the way that I was able to control this popper is with a regulator like this. And I just got this thing off of Amazon. And what it does is this dial right here allows you to dial back how hot and fast the roast is going on that popcorn popper. I also use this in conjunction with my heat gun, okay, when I'm roasting coffee in my bread machine. So this guy, combined with measuring the temperature, was a huge breakthrough for me in roasting coffee successfully, okay? So, yeah, if you have a popcorn popper, it can roast pretty good coffee, but you have to figure out a way to control the beast, if you will. I personally think that, you know, this right here is called the HIVE Roaster. I've showed this in another video, and I've run my thermocouple up in there. So when the coffee beans, you know, you manually agitate the coffee beans, and as the coffee beans are flowing, they're flowing over this probe here. And this is what it looks like with the top on it. And yeah, that right there is a great way to roast coffee. I've found that using this gas stove is a great way to use that piece of equipment. And, you know, but definitely the idea here is you must have a way to be able to control your heat, because as the roast progresses, you need less heat as the roast goes along, okay? So one of the mistakes that I made was just pouring on the heat for the entire roast, and the beans looked great, but they tasted awful because the inside of the bean needs time to develop, you know, and slowing down and reducing your heat over time as you progress through your roast is pretty important. And that's where the temperature gauge and using something like this regulator for an electrical heat source is critical. So yeah, those are some of the big breakthroughs. I think the other thing that's really important here is cooling your beans when you're done with your roast, okay? So the way that I do that is I use this mesh colander, and I put this on top of a fan, a tornado fan, and I use a wooden spoon, and I stir the beans very aggressively over the fan, and I'm able to chill the roasted coffee in about 1 minute. And so that stops the roast. If you just dump your beans and you just let them sit there, they will continue to roast further. And that's not really what you want. You really want to stop the roast as quickly as possible. And so you can use a metal colander like that right there to stop the roast. But yeah, so you know, it's you have to be a little bit of a handyman to set up some of this stuff. And you know, like on my bread machine, you know, this is what the inside of the pan looks like. And you can see, here's my, you know, thermocouple, and I drilled a hole on the outside, and on the inside you can see that the thermocouple is right down here in this corner. And as the beans, this is the blade that agitates the beans are flowing over the tip of that thermocouple, and I'm getting a reading of the beans at every point in time. So again, if you're just starting off, to recap, what I think is a good generic profile is a 4 minute, 4 minute, 4 minute roast, where you dry for 4 minutes, you brown for 4 minutes, and then you develop for 4 minutes, maybe 5 minutes, depending on how dark of a roast you want to achieve. And I think that if you do that, measuring the temperature of the coffee beans, adjusting your heat as you go along by dialing it down, you know, you can start to achieve some really, really good results. I roasted this Ethiopia last Saturday, and man, it's really, really good. So, yeah, it's very sweet, it's not bitter, and it tastes fantastic. But if you have any questions, shoot them in the comments below. But yeah, these are some tips and tricks that I've picked up along the way, and maybe they'll help you out as well. All right, everybody, take care. Bye-bye.